Invisible Woman is amongst the strongest supports in the game when utilized to her maximum potential, but many players don't realize just how hard it is to master Sue Storm. My name is Paz, an Eternity support player on the competitive ladder, and I'm going to tell you all of the things you actually need to know in order to pop off and carry on Invisible Woman. Before we get started with her abilities, understand that the way that you carry on Invisible Woman is by pulling important targets into the effective range of your team, as well as charging your ultimate as fast as humanly possible. The way that you go about doing this is by lining up as many targets as possible with your primary fires to hit as many friendlies and enemies at the same time. Her gameplay loop is simple but difficult, so let's start with what generates all that ult charge, her primary fire. Sue throws out orb projections, dealing 20 damage per hit to enemies or 40 healing per hit to allies. She throws out 2 orbs per second with 10 orbs per reload currently, and the orbs move at a moderate speed, meaning you might need to lead your shots a little bit at range. The unique thing about these orbs is that they are more like boomerangs rather than a normal shot. Essentially, the orb travels in a straight line where you shoot it 30 meters away from you and then immediately bounces back to Invisible Woman. This means that the orb really does 40 damage or 80 healing per shot if the targets get hit by both instances of the single orb. Because of the way the primary fire works, it is really important that you line up as many targets as possible with you so that you can get the most out of each and every shot. In a world where you hit 11 targets with your damage or healing and every single point counts, you can charge 640 points of ultimate charge per shot, or 15% to your ultimate per shot. That is absolutely incredible. What you can do to make the healing a bit faster is to aim at the ground of the last target you want to hit so that you can trigger the bounce faster. You don't really have enough damage to eliminate targets on your own as Invisible Woman, so it is important to play to charge your ultimate as fast as possible. If you want to deal more consistent damage though, you'll want to be further away from your targets actually, since the orb snapback will hit more consistently if it doesn't have to travel as far back to you if you can perfectly find that range. You can also just aim at their feet like we said earlier. This also helps with healing targets on your team a bit faster too. While you do want to stack your team, you'll definitely want to be a little bit further back so it just comes in a bit faster, but it isn't the end of the world if you find yourself a little bit closer either. It really just depends on the situation. Let's shift our focus to Invisible Woman's right click, the Guardian Shield, that instantly gets placed on the friendly target you are looking at in the direction they are facing, healing them for 50 HP per second with a maximum shield health of 300 before it breaks. The shield is 3 meters wide, so you really shouldn't think of this as a big shield like Strange's or Magneto's, but rather more of like a personal shield that is really good for blocking specific sources of damage that are really important to block. Think things like if your support gets hit by Strange's ult, or if they are about to get hit by a Magneto ultimate. In that case, you can just block the meteor and it kills nobody. But this does require them to look at the ult when it is flying at them and also for them to trust you, so good luck finding that in ranked. You can also use the shield when someone is trying to push the target you are shielding, since it does slow enemies down by 30% for 3 seconds, which most people don't actually know about, and it is a way to get value by swiftly pulling the shield away once the enemy walks through it, like a Spider-Man for example. The main thing you need to focus on with this ability though is that when it breaks fully, it goes on a 6-second cooldown, which might not sound like a big deal, but trust me, that is 6 seconds that you can't give your team a get out of jail free card. And in ranked, we know these types of abilities are super important to keep up as much as possible. You can take down the shield early by pressing F by default. This will bring the shield back into your inventory, I like to call it, and begin regenerating the shield to maximum health. During this time, the shield will still be on cooldown, but it will not be on cooldown for nearly as long, allowing you to have it back up for the right moments when you need to block important things again. If you would rather not bring it back to your inventory though, and simply need to replace the position of it in the heat of battle, you can also just press the cooldown on a new teammate and it will move instantly to their position. The shield will keep all the damage it took though, and it will not regenerate anything, just keep that in mind. In ranked, the shield doesn't just have to be used to save your team either. It can also be used to heal yourself if the other support you are playing with is really struggling struggling to play the game and heal you too, which happens more often than I'd like to admit. What you can do in these cases is to place your shield on your team as you are walking to the fight and keeping it placed there as your team continues to walk, allowing you to have cover and healing over time to play off of throughout the fight. I know it sounds crazy, but it does help a lot more than people realize. I want to close out the shield section of this video with two different things to think about when you're using the shield though, since it can get pretty convoluted. The shield should be used in one of two ways. First, to block key damage from eliminating your team. Think about things like Magneto ults and Strange ults if he hits someone, and even things as simple as Hella daggers or Hawkeye arrows that your team is completely ignoring. Essentially, shielding things that are heavy burst damage that have a high chance of eliminating your team, not consistent damage that builds up over time, like Punisher for example. Second, you can also use your shield to enable teammates' aggression, especially from an off angle. For example, if you have a Star-Lord that is looking to ult from the sky, providing him with a shield in the air will not only block tons of damage sent his way, it will also heal him if he gets low. This makes him practically invincible and will result in at least a pick every time. The same goes for Punishers when they are ulting, or heck, even if they are just sitting in their turrets. Even shielding Namor and Hela on an off angle is good if they start getting looked at. All these situations help your DPS do even more on their angles while playing Invisible Woman, who can't really help DPS all the time. But now that we understand how to shoot and shield our team, let's discuss how we can create more active value throughout the fight with her push and pull ability. When Sue utilizes her E by default, otherwise known as Force Physics, she readies herself, taking her out of invisibility if she is within it, to either push enemies by pressing left click or pull enemies in by pressing right click if they are in the radius of where she is looking within 30 meters of her. When she hits targets, they take 55 damage whether they are pushed or pulled, and the ability is on an 8-second cooldown. The ability might seem kind of like whatever, but I am telling you right now, mastering this ability is what allows you to carry on Invisible Woman. That isn't even that hot of a take, it is just facts. First, you can use the pull to straight up just find free picks for your team. That Namor that is on the high ground flanking your team, he's off the high ground and just got nuked by your Strange. That tank that just stepped a little bit too close, he just got pulled in, Groot walled, and then the rest is history. It never gets old. Pulling is not the only way to find value though, because we've got pushing too. On Spider Islands, you can legit just stand there and wait for the enemy team to walk past, and then poof, they're all gone, off the map, and probably blaming someone on their team for their stupid death. You can also use the push to stop characters like Spider-Man, Magic, Black Panther, Iron Fist, really any melee character from decimating your team. You just have to be careful not to do it too early when they are already using a movement ability, because then they will just power through it. You do typically want to wait to displace them until they have no options to move anymore and have to just walk through open space to get away, oftentimes ending up in them getting eliminated. You just want to be careful that you don't pull someone into your team when your team is low, letting them eliminate your team for free, or push someone out when they are about to die just because you wanted to do that little bit of extra damage. Nothing is more tilting than when I'm about to eliminate someone and then they just get pushed out of my line of sight. Do not be that guy on Invisible Woman. Before we move on, there are two interactions you need to be aware of on Invisible Woman regarding your push and pull. First, her push. You always want to keep this up when the enemy Strange has his ultimate. It is impossible to hit a Strange ultimate when you have push online, because you send him far enough that he will be just barely out of range to hit anyone if you keep tabs of him. It is quite possibly the most infuriating matchup to play in the game, and it is one that you need to keep tabs of as Invisible Woman. Next, Invisible Woman is the most efficient counter to Wolverine in the game. This is because she can pull Wolverine out of his grab when he latches onto someone. So just like Strange, when Wolverine is in the game, all attention goes to him and pulling or pushing him out of getting literally any value. To be honest, this one interaction alone is enough to warrant Sue getting any playtime versus Loki in ranked, aside from a couple other niche situations. So let's move on to another ability. Next, we are going to cover the Psionic Vortex, which is a ball of psionic energy that Sue throws out by pressing shift by default. The ball will burst whenever an enemy or the environment comes in contact with it, or when the player presses shift again. This will be important for later. When an enemy is inside of the vortex, they will be slowed by 50% in the center of the field, applying less and less movement slow the further the enemy gets to the edge. On top of a slow effect, the vortex will also pull enemies to the center if they are not moving. The field lasts 4 seconds with a radius of 5 meters and has a cooldown of 12 seconds. A weird interaction to note with the vortex is that if it comes in contact with Magneto's shield, it will just straight up never proc. So it is important to always get into the habit of placing the vortex with your second shift instead of just letting it hit all of the time. In terms of where you want to place the vortex, there are a couple things you'll want to think about. First off, if you are playing as a Brawl composition into another Brawl composition, you'll almost always want to just stack this on the enemy's tanks when they look to push, since this will not only slow them down, but also deal continuous damage to confirm picks and at the very least build you up alt charge continuously. The vortex can also be used on enemy DPS that are taking off angles to catch them out of position and give your friendly DPS a free pick if they are aware of what is going on. You do want to think about what DPS you are throwing it at though, and make sure you are okay with just forcing out a cooldown in these scenarios. And this is only if they don't really have a whole lot of stacking teammates to slow in bulk. Lastly, you can use your vortex defensively as well. Let's say a diver like Black Panther or Spider-Man try to jump on you. You can use your vortex at your feet, jump out of it, and then pull or push them into the vortex to live longer and have an easier time finding the pick afterwards. Most of the time though, you will be using this ability after pulling a target in just so it is harder for them to get out, confirming a pick, but in the niche situations where you change how you use the ability, now you know. Alright, but before we move into understanding the ultimate, we've been talking about charging all guide. Let's talk about her last ability, her Veiled Step, and her passive Covert Advance. In more normal non-nerd emoji words, her jump and her invisibility passive. Essentially, if you haven't taken any damage or done anything with your kit after a few seconds, you'll go invisible and heal yourself for 20 points per second. It is nice and can help you avoid getting dove before the fights start. Just realize that your footsteps are pretty loud and the enemy team will know if you are around. The reason the jump is in this section as well is because you can double jump, granting you invisibility immediately. So this is how you heal yourself over time if you don't have your shield online or just don't have an ally to use it on. The problem with jump though is that a lot of players just kind of use it for mobility instead of what it is really nice for, keeping you alive. First off, if you get dove, you can legit just jump and you are fine now until the ability comes up again. Not only that, but if the mag ult ever comes out after you use your ult, you can just jump to go invisible and then protect your other support with your shield. There is really never a reason to die to mag ult when you have jump. Because of this, it is important that you don't just jump because you feel like it and you really use it when you need to. Put yourself in positions where you can get help from your support and hold on to the ability for just a little bit longer, and you will find that you are living much more often in fights. Path with your passive to be set up in the safest position before the fight and use your jump when applicable. Oh yeah, and for some reason the developers also wanted to add in the passive with her melee where she can get a 3 melee combo, and the last melee hit in that combo will launch enemies up if they get hit by it. So if you see someone is about to dive you, you can always charge up 2 melees in advance and then give them a good wallop if you want. The same goes for if you think someone is going to touch point in overtime. But now we have finally gotten to the portion of the guide where we can talk about Invisible Woman's ultimate, the Invisible Boundary. When pressing the ultimate, Sue gets a prompt to place the ultimate where she can then place it using left click. When placed, a cylindrical spell field materializes, healing your team for 165 HP per second for 8 seconds. On top of this, everyone inside the field is invisible to those outside of the ultimate on the enemy team. All they get are these minor illusions that flash every few seconds, and whenever they enter or leave the field, they are also hit with a major 55% slow for a second that really sucks. It feels like your foot is getting stuck in quicksand and will set up picks for your team more than you realize. Because of this, it is important to think about placing your ultimates in the most optimal places. Typically, you want to place your ult on point so it forces the enemy to fight or give up the objective, while also trying to split the enemy team in half so the enemy supports have no information on the fight. Think about it from their point of view. If the enemy supports aren't in the field, but the enemy tanks are, they have to guess or ask what is going on in there, forcing them to walk in and possibly die from being out of position, or even waste an ultimate just because they don't want someone to fall on their watch or else they'll get flamed. This is obviously countered with good communication, but let's be real, no one has that in ranked. At the end of the day though, the most important thing is that you place the ultimate somewhere around point so that you guarantee it gets value. Using the ultimates early to engage is really bad since it cannot move like all of the other support ultimates. That is why I almost always use this ultimate second unless we are planning on fighting on points. Other than that, this ult functions a lot like other support ultimates. Use it when the enemy uses an ult that is going to wipe your team, or if your tank gets low on points, and then turn the fight. Don't overcomplicate it, it's not rocket science. What is nice though is say that you have a Star-Lord ultimate. It can be nice to combo with that since enemies outside of the ultimate won't be able to see him flying around on the inside. This is super niche though and is something that you won't be able to replicate in ranked a lot since just starting the fight with a Star-Lord ult and an Invisible Woman ult is a little weird and not efficient if the enemies don't get baited into using anything too. Something you need to be careful about with this ultimate though is that when you die on Sue, it vanishes early, and since the healing is only 165 per second, you can die through the healing if the enemy is really efficient with their focus fire or if you cast the ultimate when you are low on HP. So if the enemies use an ult like Magneto or Punisher, make sure that you're being careful. The same goes for a Hawkeye arrow or anything else that's really high damage and burst. You also need to know that people on the outside of the ultimate can see other people on the other side of the ultimate if they are also outside. The only way you can really guarantee yourself safety is if you were inside the ultimate. Enemy players on the inside of the ultimate though cannot see outside. It is only outside to other players on the outside. To be honest, Sue's ult is pretty underwhelming, but that isn't why it is good. It is good because it charges so fast, so get used to charging it as fast as possible. Pull people into the ult or push them out to apply crazy amounts of slowing crowd control, and use the Psionic Vortex to slow them down even further to save your team and swing fights in your favor. Now that we understand how Invisible Woman's kit works, let's begin to understand what counters her and who she plays well with. First off, Sue really struggles into any team that doesn't want to play stacked and instead takes a bunch of different angles. This is because all of her abilities simply function better when almost everyone is stacked in the lobby. She does more damage, applies more slowing effects, and is safer when the gameplay is front to back. If only say a Hela on both teams are taking off angles, it's not that bad, but when the enemy composition starts containing things like a Spider-Man and Venom with a bunch of other divers like, I don't know, Captain America and Star-Lord, she is going to really struggle to get a lot done, and it's really on her team to clutch up. It goes both ways though, by the way. If Invisible Woman's team wants to play this dive-centric playstyle, she is going to struggle to build ult charge and subsequently is also really going to struggle to bring anything to the table for her team. In these cases, it's just better to play Cloak or Luna. Anyways, specific characters that she doesn't like playing into are those that can take angles and outrange her, so really any flyer in the game, as well as characters like Hela, Hawkeye, you name it. She can pull characters like Hela and Hawkeye if they get close enough, but it definitely isn't fun to play against. If you get nothing out of this guide, just understand that Sue wants to line people up and farm her ult. In terms of what Invisible Woman synergizes well with, she does well with just that. Characters that want to front to back and brawl out. So she does really well with characters like The Thing, Doctor Strange, and Groot. She can pull targets into all of their effective ranges, and she even gives The Thing and Reed a bonus passive granting extra bonus damage reduction on top of bonus health generation over time. So to be honest, most tanks Invis is really good with, at least with what we got right now. As a result, she is also pretty good with characters like Bucky or Magic that want to get close and personal with the enemies, or even Wolverine to bring the targets to him. Lastly, in terms of supports, she can be slotted with really any support comp, but most commonly is the second best option after either Luna or Loki get banned, at least in the current meta. It really comes down to everyone in the lobby though when it comes to Sue. Now that we understand Invisible Woman's kit, the people she likes to play with and doesn't like to have in the game with her, let's now apply all the things we've learned into 3 different VODs. All right, so for this first VOD review, I wanted to highlight a game that just happened recently this past weekend in MRC, where this Invisible Woman on Evolution 1 against Nightmare had 120,000 healing by the end of the game. They actually ended up winning, not the whole series, but at least this map. And I just wanted to show you guys everything he is doing correctly throughout this fight, because everything we talked about today, he's essentially doing. So we see it's an overtime fight. Kendrick on the other team in the Invisible Woman has his ult, but Oblivion does not yet. I want you guys to see how fast this guy can get his ultimate when everyone is stacking on both teams. Look, he's already 38%. The Magneto uses ult. He jumps away, so he's invisible, and then he uses the shield at the perfect time to keep his Mantis ult going, start shooting into all of the action here. Already 56% to his ult. Jumps away from the Thing ult too, a crazy good awareness from him, and look, he's already 75%. But the craziest part hasn't even happened yet. I just want to show you guys. 93%. We know that the Star-Lord from the enemy team almost has ult. Gets his ult in time to stop the Star-Lord ult too. Continues to shoot from main. We get the pick on the Star-Lord that was trying to carry the fight. And now, our Star-Lord on Evolution 1 is going to use his ultimate, and we're going to use the shield after he uses the bubble to allow him to go even deeper into the backline. Then they're going to continue to push this and win this fight, but that is just absolutely crazy. Again, already 30%. He just used his ultimate. If everyone is stacking, if you're playing a Brawl composition against a Brawl composition like this, a Res Brawl comp, just look how fast and how much value you can get with just carrying with your ultimate, with your shields. It's actually crazy that you can do this much on a support, and that's why I think more people really need to play Invisible Woman when Luna Snow is banned. All right, y'all, so for this next VOD, I wanted to show you guys me playing in like 300 around in Eternity, and just how much distance Invisible Woman's pool can actually get you. So in this situation, we're playing on defense, and the enemy team actually stranged portaled up to the high ground. It's actually a pretty common thing that happens quite a bit. But right here, as you can see, I can push, or pull rather, all of these people off the high ground, which is going to set my team up for essentially free picks. In this situation, it looks like the Bucky got actually like legitimately one shot before he got max healed again. But if you can continue doing stuff like that and setting up psionic slows with your orbs as the vortex, it's actually quite crazy how much value you can get. We didn't end up actually winning this fight because eventually they just charged their ultimates, and I should have been playing a little bit more actively. But because you can do stuff like that, you really need to be taking advantage of just setting up your team, trying to pull people back into your team's line of sight, into their effective range, and get a lot more value done that way. Now on the same exact map, I wanted to show you guys a play that I made that actually probably won us the game. It all started with a little bit of a mistake that I had, that I was placed on the right side of this wall instead of the left, where I could have been playing with my team, probably healing them. We probably would have been a lot more safe this way. But you know, sometimes you make mistakes and you got to make something happen. So I go around the back, take some pressure off of my team, and this is what I wanted to show you guys. You can absolutely turn fights with your Invisible Woman ult, especially if you place it first on point for retakes. Right here, the moment I place down that wall, their team doesn't know who to heal, which allows an infinite ammo Punisher to find 2 picks, and then we turn the fight here in a place that's really important, because if you look here, this is easily one of the most important fights to win on defense on this map, because now we have better spawns than the enemy team for where the objective is, and we still get to hold on second point. Inevitably, we win the game because they then have a really small time bank on the last point, and then that's more elo, closer to 1 above all. And that closes out today's guide for Invisible Woman in Marvel Rivals. If you have any questions, make sure to send them in the comments down below, as well as asking me live right now here on YouTube or on Twitch at twitch.tv/PazSwagger. I stream every day I upload, so be sure to check me out to learn more about everything I talked about today. And thank you guys all so much for watching, but until next time, I've got to peace out and Paz out. I'll see you in the next one.